Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the 2020 Pacific Northwest Pretreatment Workshop. My name is Andrea Swan. I'm the pretreatment coordinator with the City of Sumner in Washington State. My co-moderator is Ari DeHoop. He is the pretreatment coordinator for the City of Klamath Falls in Oregon. He had to step away briefly, otherwise he'd say hello. We're really excited for today. The theme of the day is case studies. So we're going to be hearing from folks around the nation about their pretreatment programs and experiences that they've had with industrial users. We wanted to remind everyone before we get started that if you need CEUs for this workshop, please be sure to participate in our polls that we generate each hour. Each hourly poll is going to be worth 0.1 CEUs. So at the end of the day, if you do all 4 polling events, which would equal 8 separate polls, you will earn 0.4 CEUs. We want to remind everyone, especially for those who are joining us for the first time during this webinar series, if you have issues seeing the poll, sometimes it won't pop up on your screen. And the guidance that we've gotten from GoToMeetings is that if you minimize your the GoToMeeting webinar screen, then it'll allow the poll to pop up. If you continue to have issues, please utilize the questions or the chat box to reach out to the moderators. Then we will give you guidance on what to do from there. We're generally asking folks that if you are not able to take the poll at the time that the poll is being performed, if you email me, Andrea Swan directly, most of you have my email. If you email me the answer to the poll, or just letting me know that you're having issues with the poll, I'll have a time-stamped email that lines up with the timeline of the poll, and I'll be able to use that to confirm your participation, and we can update the records. I think that's a really good approach because, you know, sometimes technology doesn't always work, and we understand that. Plus, this is also new. So we're going to encourage you guys to use the Q&A box for questions. You guys aren't able to chime in with questions. So if you post questions in the box, we will either ask the presenter in real time during their presentation, or we will ask them at the end of their presentation during a Q&A session. It just depends on the speaker's preference that they've indicated before today. We're going to try to take a few breaks today during our 4-hour webinar session, but we will definitely have a 5-minute break at 9:55 or whatever time we finish the second presentation with Mr. Eric Martinson before we get into our 10 o'clock presentation today with Bree Halls, the City of Portland. We will be sending out a survey. Please complete this. We value everyone's feedback. We'd love to hear how you feel this workshop went this year. And specifically, we'd love to get feedback on topics that you'd like to see in future workshops. That's really valuable to us. And finally, I'll just remind everyone that our presentations each webinar session is being recorded. We will be posting the webinar sessions to our website at a date that's to be determined. It's going to be sometime after all of the entire webinar series has completed, so sometime after next Monday. We'll try to do it as soon as possible, but just understand that this is our first time doing it virtually, so it may take us a few days or a few weeks. We'll also upload the presentation slides to our website for those speakers who have authorized the posting of their presentation. And if there were any supplemental documents that they've distributed or would like to have distributed, we'll also post them. Okay, so the next slide is going to go into our schedule for today. First, we're going to have Stacy Lemaire share a presentation about beer and milk. Then we're going to have Mr. Eric Martinson at 9 to share some enforcement case studies. Bree Holes will be joining us at 10 to share an experience with Oregon Oils. And then we're going to be wrapping it up today with both Jean Bennett and Charles Johnson with the City of Everett. They've got a fun presentation to share about the chronicles of a molybdenum search. So I hope that you guys are situated with coffee in hand and ready to go. I will remind everyone that we do have a virtual networking event this evening. We're really excited about it, so do join us if you can. It's at 5:30 this evening. There's going to be breakout rooms, kind of like a table topic approach, where we can talk about public education and outreach, or program dynamics, or pre-treatment during COVID. Shoot me an email if you'd like to attend, and let me know which option, 1, 2, or 3, that you would like to be signed up for. And later today, we will send out an email with a link, with a Zoom invite link, with a link for the Zoom meeting, sorry. So look for that in your email if you have reached out to me, letting me know that you'd like to join us. Okay, well, with that, I'm going to invite Stacy to say hello to everyone. Stacy,
hello.
Can you remind me where exactly you're joining us from today?
Boise, Idaho.
Well, hello. And you're with HDR.
Yes.
Got a pretty interesting case study to share. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to share your screen. And before you get going, I will let everyone know that Stacy has a video in her presentation, but we had some technical difficulties related to the video. So what I'm preparing to do, if we can't get it figured out before she gets to the spot that she's sharing the video, I'm going to paste the link into either the chat or the questions box, or both, so that you guys can watch it on your own time if we're not able to watch it together during her presentation. So with that, Stacy, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. And you can see my first slide?
We can, yes.
Great, great. Well, I am so happy to present today. This has been a fantastic workshop so far. I've attended the first 3 days and have just been blown away by the speakers. It's been super great. The pre-treatment world, as well as the safety, health, and environment world in industry are both pretty difficult worlds to navigate. You're kind of policing folks, and that can be very difficult. And I've been so happy to be able to work and help on both fronts with regards to industrial pretreatment. Oh, it's not advancing to the next slide. I'm sorry. I seem to be stuck. Is it going to the next slide?
It is not going to the next slide.
Goodness, what's going on?
Hmm.
Oh, here we go. Okay, let's try it again. Okay,
There you
how about
go.
now?
Okay.
Okay,
Yep, we see the next slide. Thanks.
great. Well, so I was actually in the office last Saturday working on this presentation, and when I got home, my husband had started yet another home project, and I'm sure that a lot of you on this call have been doing home projects, given our current COVID situation. In fact, I've been to Home Depot 50 times, I believe, since March. It's ridiculous. But we started another home project where we're putting some wood floors in a bedroom. And so I was tasked with cleaning out the closet. And ironically, I found this business card. So this is my very first business card from 1990, when I was a laboratory technician and wastewater treatment plant operator for Johnson County Environmental Department. So I thought it was most appropriate for me to share this business card with you from 30 years ago. So I started my career in wastewater, and in particular industrial wastewater in Johnson County, Kansas. And I worked at a facility that served an industrial park. And in that industrial park, there were quite a few manufacturers. There were 4 food manufacturers, and 3 of those were margarine manufacturers. And back in 1990, the pre-treatment program was just getting kicked off. And so I was tasked with kind of being the eyes and the ears and the testing on the ground to help in developing that pre-treatment program. So this wastewater treatment facility was just newly constructed. It was upgraded to conventional activated sludge, and about 90% of the wastewater it received was industrial. So one of the first things that we did was CCTV some lines, and I'm sure that all of you out there wish that your sewer lines looked like this. Unfortunately, most of our sewer lines look like this. And as you can imagine, with three margarine manufacturers and 4 food and beverage manufacturers, oil and grease was a huge, huge issue. In addition, we had a bout with bioslime, and I don't know if anyone on the call has dealt with that, but it's a very interesting thing to try to track down. So you can see this slimy goo that is in the sewer pipe, which posed problems throughout the collection system. So here's the wastewater treatment facility, and as I'd indicated, it's a conventional activated sludge. And some of the issues that we dealt with right away during startup and commissioning were grease balls that were probably about the size of basketballs that would hit the headworks and the primary clarifier. In addition, we had a lot of surfactants, and so I actually worked second shift because I was studying engineering during the day in school, and I drove into the facility one afternoon, and I could not drive past the aeration basins because they had foamed so much and overflowed all of the basins that there was just foam all around. I had to park and walk around to get into the laboratory to try to help figure out what was going on and what we could do. So some substantial, issues with influent, and most of the facilities cleaned on Friday evenings, and so we would get hit on the weekends, which posed a problem obviously for the biology, because they would feast on the weekend and then starve the rest of the week. So here's an example of oil and grease that actually made it all the way through the system, and this is the final clarifier before it was discharged to a tributary. Fortunately, most of the oil and grease stayed in the clarifier, and we didn't have a compliance issue, but you can imagine that me being an operator, cleaning this out was no fun. In fact, cleaning the clarifier was actually one of my favorite jobs, to get the boots on and clean the algae out of the weirs. So what I learned early in my career, there's some tools of the trade that are super important. And my three favorite things are the sludge judge, the samplers, and the microscope. This teeny little microscope is $99. I have one with me all the time. In fact, I have all three of these with me all the time. And you'd be surprised that little $99 microscope can get the job done. So if you're ever in a pinch and you need one, just go to a toy store and you can pick one up. And of course, all of the laboratory skills that I learned in the 5 years that I was with Johnson County. In fact, this is a photo of me just recently in Texas working at a semiconductor facility. So those skills never go away and they're always handy. So utilizing those tools, the first case study I'd like to talk about is a dairy. And this particular client, I had worked at 4 of their facilities, and they were proposing a brand new facility. And it was a mix of products that they did not make at any of the other facilities. All of their other facilities had both dairy wastewater as well as non-dairy wastewater, and they didn't have one that was 100% dairy, and they didn't have one that had a profile of the milk products all the way from fat-free to whipping cream. So what I suggested was that we send off some of the product to the lab and have some laboratory testing completed to try to determine what the wastewater was going to look like so that we could design a system to treat that wastewater. So we ran a variety of constituents on the different products. And then from that, we were able to put together a calculator essentially that took they were able to enter in what they thought their production volumes would be, the percentage of those volumes, and then we could calculate a weighted estimate of the constituents in the wastewater based on those production volumes. So we could change these parameters. We could also then change what we thought the percent loss would be in the product. So when they do CIP, they have a certain amount that stays in the equipment and in the lines that goes with the wastewater down the drain, and they can estimate that based on current operation, or obviously they have a goal, a key performance indicator to try to sell and package as much product as possible. So we entered this percentage, and then it would calculate the estimated wastewater concentrations on an average and on a maximum. So for this particular municipality that was receiving this wastewater, they had some pretty lenient regulations on TSS and BOD. Obviously, you paid surcharges associated with those, but the TSS limit was 7,200 and the BOD limit was 11,000, but the oil and grease limit was 500. So we were pushing in the maximum situation an issue with the compliance on the fats, oils, and greases. Another thing that we decided to do while we had the product in the lab was to try to replicate a CIP process. So we took whole milk, and we introduced the caustic water that they would normally use during a CIP. We did about a 10% ratio, and we did rapid mixing to mimic what it would be like in the plant. And the caustic emulsifies the oil and grease, and that's the reason why it's effective in the cleaning process. So in order to de-emulsify that oil and grease, we dropped the pH to 3, and we watched what would happen over a period of time, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and 1 hour. And what this proved to us is that if we could mimic this in a wastewater treatment process, which would be relatively simple to do with pH adjustment and some settling, gravity settling, that we could get them well within permit limits with doing a pretty simple wastewater treatment process. So based on the supernate from that experiment, we made some assumptions, and we wanted to be really conservative on those assumptions because what you could do in a glass jar in the lab, you may not be able to 100% replicate in a large tank in the field in real time. And one thing that has been mentioned, along the way, I think Robert Smith from Cambrian mentioned that manufacturers are in the business of making a product, and that's where their profit comes from, and that's where their product pride is
Excuse
around
me.
that.
Hey,
Uh-huh.
Stacy, I'm going to interrupt you briefly. I'm
Okay.
having a few people chime in that the sound went off. I can still hear you. Let's see. I'd ask folks that are having a hard time or can maybe still hear to chime in. So I do see a couple people saying they can still hear. Okay, so maybe it was just an issue with one or two folks. Okay, great. Then I'll follow up with them directly. It was, I think 3 people said that the sound just left, so I wanted to make sure it wasn't everyone who was experiencing that problem, but it looks like sounds
Okay.
just fine. So I apologize
Okay.
for interrupting you.
Oh no, that's
Yeah, just nature
okay.
of the virtual workshops. And I will add one more thing while I've got you paused. The general guidance that I'm getting about videos is that if you can download it onto your computer, you would be able to share it. I don't know if you'd be able to do that when
I
you
I,
reach
I
the
did
slide.
download it.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay. And so are you playing it from the downloaded video, are you playing it from the internet or the download when you tried it
I
earlier with
was
us?
playing. I was playing it from YouTube with the link from
Ah,
YouTube, so
so
I can try
we'll
it.
try. Yeah, we'll try that.
Yeah.
It may be, it will ask for everyone's patience when you get to that slide, to allow
Okay.
you to pull it up and let me know if you need me to stop sharing the screen. Otherwise, I'll let you continue going. But thanks for
Okay.
letting me stop you for a sec.
Oh yes, great, great. Yeah, so on the industry side, they are focused on the product and producing that product, and wastewater treatment is an ancillary thing. Environmental compliance in general is an ancillary thing, and it's really hard to find good operators that are really dedicated to operating systems. So that's one of the challenges, and so we wanted to be conservative in estimating what type of removal that we would get, knowing that the operators at the facility were going to struggle a bit. So we assumed a 20% reduction in BOD, a 25% reduction in TSS, and a 30% reduction in oil and grease, and that's somewhat standard with gravity separation or dissolved air flotation. So with dissolved air flotation, obviously oil and grease removal is substantially higher. But so we applied those same principles to this spreadsheet, and with that same 2% and 4% loss, we were able to get the fats, oil, and greases down below the 500 limit. And as I indicated, I think that it would be substantially lower than that, given that the clarity of that supername. So what we ultimately recommended that they do is they install 3 equalization tanks in parallel, and they would fill the tank one tank at a time and allow for that 1 hour to 30-minute separation, and then pull off the supernate from that tank as the effluent. As I indicated, this would be in that compliance level, but more difficult to operate, of course. We did an analysis based on the costs, the capital costs associated with the project, and then the potential savings associated with surcharges with BOD, suspended solids, and the oil and grease issue. And so they could save almost $600,000 a year with this recommended alternative B. But we'd also looked at no treatment at all, the pre-primary treatment as I had described, and then a little bit further treatment, either skimmer or DAF. The client unfortunately chose phase 1 with just pH adjustment and assumed that those percent losses they were going to be able to hold on to and not reach that 4% loss and be able to stay below that 500 milligram per liter oil and grease limit. Unfortunately, that was not the case. So this is the actual data comparison from pre-design to post-design. And our original estimates based on the other 4 facilities that I had worked at, had we used those, they were about almost 200% higher than what was actually seen. If we would have used the lab estimates based on the actual product loss that we saw at the other facilities, which is more like 4 to 10% product loss, we would have been at about 140%. With the lab estimates of 2% and 4%, we were about 75% of the actual. So they ended up having a maximum of 994, obviously out of compliance, and average of 358. So if I use the calculator again and I look at what numbers should we have taken a look at, it was just a little bit above 2, so between 2 and 3, and then about 7% product loss. So we should have been a little bit higher on that maximum end. So as I'd indicated, they are having to put in another treatment process to obviously remain in compliance. And because they ultimately ended up with a large 400,000 gallon tank instead of 3 smaller tanks, they will not be able to use the laboratory method that we had tested. So another experience that I've had is with brewery wastewater, and we've heard a couple of really great talks. Stephanie Kearns, the first day from Newport, kicked it off with some great experience that she's had down there, and then Robert Smith with Cambrian also talked about craft beer and brewery wastewater in general. But I received a call, this was back in 2009, from a small municipal wastewater treatment facility in Manhattan, Kansas, and this was just a small little 150,000 gallon per day conventional activated sludge aeromod facility, and they indicated that their final settling tank was not looking like this picture indicates that it should. Instead, their final clarifier was looking like this. So they had obviously substantial issue with bulking, sludge bulking, and I happened to have my discrete sampler and my microscope in the car, and I was able to do a quick evaluation that that was their issue. So they were getting some high loading associated with something, and it was dropping the DO in the aeration basis substantially and causing some biological disruption. So I put in the discrete sampler. We did the individual samples every hour for 24 hours. And when I came back the next day, I opened up the lid to the sampler and it smelled just like beer. So I asked the operators, do you have a brewery online? And they were not aware of a brewery being online. So what had happened is a small craft brewery had decided to operate a bottling facility in a strip mall, and the wastewater treatment plant was not alerted. I think that the folks that had approved the operation were convinced that it wouldn't be any substantial wastewater, and that there wasn't any real reason to alert the wastewater treatment plant because it was just beer. So obviously 800 milligrams per liter of BOD coming into the plant. This was the discrete sampler. Had I been able to test all 24 bottles, I'm sure we would have seen spikes much higher than that. But we went ahead from a cost perspective. They didn't want to run that many BOD analysis. So we just combined all the samples, and it was 800 milligrams per liter. So we went and visited the brewery, and we told them what was going on, and we asked them to go ahead and install an equalization tank, and gave them, you know, all the tools in order to do that. They had the ability to get to a above ground tank, given the way their facility was set up, and then they could just trickle the flow to the facility, because, you know, obviously the bugs love beer. They just love it at a more constant level. So, you know, the brewery did not install a equalization tank, and when we visited the next time, we've done a little bit of chemical addition to try to knock down some of the BOD and oxidize some of that before it got to the plant. So we were able to nurse the plant along, but the brewery did not put in the equalization tank as we had suggested, and they still didn't believe that what they were sending down the drain should be harmful to the facility. So we did another test run and proved that above the brewery was 312, and downstream of the brewery it was 620. So they eventually did put in equalization, and the plant was able to operate. So, like I indicated, the bugs don't mind beer as long as they get it at a even rate. They like to be just a little bit drunk all the time instead of really drunk and a big hangover. So Robert Smith, you know, dove into some of the recoverable resources associated with the brewery waste, and you know, other things to consider are, you know, super high nitrogen levels and phosphorus levels. We did see substantially high nitrogen and phosphorus in these samples. They weren't limited on those at this facility, so it wasn't a permit issue, and but that's, you know, obviously something to think about. And obviously the way that the brewery operates their system, a lot of these things can be stored on site and utilized, whether, you know, farmer feed or other applications. So Andrea, this is where I have the video that I would like to
All
play.
right.
So do you want me to stay live and try? I'm going to have to find
It's
it on my server
Yeah,
real
it's up
fast.
to you. I will go ahead. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up our PowerPoint, and then I will share my screen, give you
Okay.
a bit to find let's see, find the video.
Okay.
Okay. So while you're doing that, I've got our presentation or our slide up about our virtual networking event today. Let's see. If you're able to, Stacy, can you remind me? I did see it on your email, but I'm drawing a blank. Was your preference to receive questions at the end of the presentation, or did you want them real time as you're going through the presentation? Oops. Perhaps should let you just look for the video. I wanted to thank everyone for chiming in when we had when we thought we were having the sound issue. That was really helpful for you guys to let us know that the sound quality was okay. So thank you to those who got on the box and let us know what you were experiencing on your end. I think
So,
that,
so Andrea,
oh,
can you
yeah,
hear me?
I can hear you.
So, so when I downloaded it, it gives me an MP3, so it doesn't show the video. But I wonder if I could sync it. That would be quite miraculous if I could do that. Let's just see if I can make that work.
And you know, if that doesn't work out, I'm going to go ahead and paste the link in 1 sec. And if anyone who's on the call, who's listening, If anyone knows a good approach other than to enabling videos for GoToWebinars, do let us know. We can give it a shot now, and then if it doesn't work, we can maybe revisit it at the end of your presentation, Stacy. Or the other option would be for me to paste the link into our chat and Q&A boxes and allow everyone to watch the video together or separately at a later time. But once we see if you can get it working on your computer, we'll go from there.
I'm getting close. We'll see if this works. If it doesn't, we'll go with plan B.
Okie doke.
Okay, if you want to share.
Yeah, I will share your screen. Here we go. You should have the request up now, Stacy.
Okay.
I see it, but I think we saw it earlier.
Okay.
It was just the sound that we were having issues with. Hey.
Okay, so let's see if you can. I'll play this first. Can you hear this?
I can't. You know, I'm not hearing anything.
You're not hearing.
No sound. Yeah.
Okay, darn it. Well, we tried.
We did. We'll get ahead of it next time.
We gave it a go.
Well, what I'll do is, would you like me to, I mean, I'll paste the link regardless, but would you like everyone to have, I think it's a pretty short video. We could potentially watch it together on our screens and you could talk through it. If we just minimize both
Well,
screens, we could do it
yeah,
simultaneously.
I think just copy and pasting it in the chat is perfect.
Okay.
And really what it is it's a case study. A brewer in Bozeman, Montana, stored their waste at their brewery and then trucked that waste to the Bozeman, Montana wastewater treatment facility. And Bozeman, Montana is required to have biological nutrient removal. And that's a very difficult process if you don't have a good carbon source. So the brewery wastewater can act as a really good carbon source. And given that it's entered into the wastewater treatment process at the right stage, so not in the influent and primary, but later, if there's say a fermenter on site, if that wastewater is that high strength carbon wastewater is added there, there's a substantial removal in nutrients. And so I highly recommend you take a listen to this. This was just a case study. It's not being fully implemented, but some really good reduction in nitrogen and phosphorus as a result. So something that I think a lot of breweries, given that there's so many located in all municipalities, a good option to consider. And with most municipalities being required to reduce nitrogen and phosphorus to really low levels. So as I indicated in the beginning, I worked at Johnson County Wastewater, where there were 3 margarine facilities that discharged to that industrial wastewater treatment plant. And I had the opportunity of obviously working there downstream, but also within the facilities once I became a consultant. And one particular manufacturer I've worked for 16 years, and I've been in 4 of their facilities, and one of them is the facility there in Kansas. I've helped on the operations side, the optimization side, so trying to optimize their chemical feed, for instance, evaluating upgrades, and then evaluating resource recovery, because there are oftentimes ways that you can design wastewater treatment plants to recover what would be a waste product into something that can be reused in another industry. For example, the brewery waste that we talked about earlier. So some of the things that I did for this particular facility was I fielded a lot of questions associated with mysterious spills, mysterious waste streams, mysterious product losses. And I received a call one day and a text message with these two photographs about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I went over to the facility before the end of the day, and I got things cleaned up, and I installed a discrete sampler to try to figure out what might be going on, because they could not figure out where all this margarine was coming into the facility. So by installing that discrete sampler in the skimmer, upstream of the skimmer, we were able to determine after about day 3 that these slug loads were happening at 3:30 in the afternoon. So we traced back into the facility that there was a new operator in the remelt room, and instead of the remelt being reused, it was going down the drain. So, had we not been able to kind of pinpoint that time with discrete sampling, we would not have been able to find out where this wastewater was coming. So these type of tools, discrete sampling, CCTV work, they're all very valuable in trying to determine what's going on in a facility. So this is the block flow of the wastewater treatment facility at this particular site, and they were going to upgrade the facility to a new type of margarine manufacturing. It was a traditional margarine manufacturing facility, and they were upgrading their facility to be a supercritical melt micronization facility. It was the first in the United States. There was only one other facility in Europe that had tried this technology. And as a function of that, I was asked to handle the permitting and the wastewater portion of the project. So in working with the engineers and the client, they had indicated to me, I had evaluated the equalization capacity, the existing equalization capacity, and determined that they really didn't need to do any downstream upgrades as long as they provided adequate equalization. They only ran the facility based on the equalization tank levels, and the tank levels only peaked during CIP on Friday. So if we could store the wastewater, we had plenty of time during the week to run that wastewater through the system, given those downtimes. So they promised me that they were going to only produce a maximum of 6,000 gallons a day, 5 days a week. So they came up with putting in a 30,000 gallon equalization tank to hold that flow and bleed that flow into the existing system for operation. So in evaluating the system, like I said, I've worked for them for 16 years, so I limited the data that I'm showing, but we look on a regular basis about how much product they're producing, water they're using, wastewater, how their effluent is being treated, and their number of violations, and then of course the cost that's associated with the surcharges and the chemical hauling costs and hauling revenue, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But in this upgrade that happened in 2015, what they had promised me as far as wastewater did not hold true, and we saw a significant decrease in the wastewater system efficiency, and ended up having ultimately 3 oil and grease violations. So this tracks the water usage with the total wastewater that goes down the drain and the amount of product that's produced. And so you can see that we were really hovering around that, 30 to 40% of the water used went down the drain, and we went substantially higher. So 55% of the water went down the drain, and a substantial increase in the water usage, very substantial increase in the water usage. So the original, thought was the 6,000 gallons per day. In actuality, there was 38,000 gallons, or originally that it was going to be a 17% increase. In actuality, it was more like 60,000 gallons a day, so 10 times the amount of wastewater that they had planned to send was sent to the facility. So about a 200% increase in what the industrial wastewater treatment system was required to treat. So it is amazing that it only had 3 violations based on an additional 60,000 gallons per day. So I'm going to go back to this schematic here. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is, obviously planning is crucial, and you can have situations where you do a lot of upfront and you get the number somewhat right. In the dairy example earlier, had the client chose the option, they with the detailed evaluation that we did up front, they probably would have been in good shape. And additionally here, had this tank been, 4 times the size, we would have been in really good shape. So just want to stress the importance of working with the industry when they indicate that they're going to do a plant expansion, to be realistic in what to expect, and certainly input from the pre-treatment coordinators on how much detail needs to go into that is really crucial. It's because it can be the difference between compliance and non-compliance, and certainly issues downstream at a municipal wastewater treatment plant. But in this facility, they have a couple of waste streams that are valuable. So the oil and grease that's removed from margarine can be sold on the yellow grease market, on the commodities market, to go in a variety of products. And so being able to capture that wastewater and to design a system that allows for it to be approximately upward 60% oil, ideally 80% oil if you can get it to that, using a heated tank and gravity separation, you can usually get it into that 60, 70, 80% oil. It can be very, very valuable. And in addition, the DAF solids, they are usually very low in percent oil and grease, or percent solids, usually about 10% in a good scenario. They are still valuable for certain operations, but not the value on the commodities market. So Johnson County happened to be building a cogeneration facility and was looking for high strength waste. So they started sending their DAF solids to the cogen facility to boost the energy production of that facility. And that's worked to be a really great relationship. It also allowed the industry to get that sustainability credit for all of the waste being either rendered or going to valuable reuse. So in just evaluating how valuable these resources can be, we looked at the skimmer waste and as well as the DAF waste. The skimmer waste is more valuable. It can go into things like animal feed, the production of rubber and plastics, Crayola and crayons, personal care products. I actually worked with Colgate Palmolive, and they produced bar soap, and they actually bought some of the product that came from the renderer for the tallow used in that process. And then biofuel. This is a growing industry, obviously. well, it peaked a few years ago, and there are some facilities that will take this waste for biofuel. So, and then, like I said, the DAF waste going to the cogen facility, they still do have to pay. These numbers are a little bit old from 2015, but they still do have to pay for the DAF waste going to cogen, but they can make anywhere from 71 cents to $1.96 in 2015 dollars on their rendered skimmed waste. And for this particular year, $570,000 in revenue. So a real substantial revenue stream for a margarine manufacturer. And I think on this, yeah, you can see the revenue streams here. So 50,000, 80,000, and then boom, they went up substantially by doing some changes to the way that they were dealing with the oil. So something to think about. So just in summary, EQ, EQ, EQ. If you can talk any industry into anything, make it EQ and make it big. And there are a couple ways to think about equalization. You can think about it as an empty tank all the time, or you can think about it as a semi-full tank all the time. And you can think of it as mixed and non-mixed. So there's certainly some options there. And again, the tools of the trade, sludge judge. This is me actually recently because of COVID. We had some field folks that had to be quarantined, and so I was out doing pond sludge sampling with my trusty sludge judge and discrete sampling we did over the summer because we wanted to take a look at what was happening at a particular facility. And what's nice about these, if folks haven't used them very often, is that you can see when you're getting flow, how that flow differs, and then if you're not getting flow. So this particular site only had intermittent flow, so we could say when it was operating, and we were actually looking at flow characteristics versus concentration. The other is that, operations is the key. If you have good guys and gals working at the facility that are, happy to work with you and happy to maintain things, and keeping a very transparent relationship with the regulatory agency, it's just key in making sure that both parties are happy and that systems are operating well. So I think I got done in a time frame that gets us back on track. I'm sorry that we got delayed with regards to the video. So,
Oh, no worries. We got a late start anyway, Stacy. So we will give you the opportunity to have some questions if you're open to it. I think that
of course.
the next presenter, Eric, he's perfectly fine with you taking a few questions. I think in the meantime, while I pull up the questions that have been asked, Ari is going to get the poll put up onto everyone's screen. So just so you know, we are performing a poll. So do let us know if you have any issues. All right, so Stacy, let's see. So a few questions that were asked. Let's see. How close was the cogen located to the plant? Looking at those numbers, it seems the cost of hauling isn't too bad. Do you know of any successful cogen happening at a treatment plant?
So that particular cogen facility is only about 15 miles from that industrial complex. So that cogen, the designer of that cogen facility contacted me, and I was able to get them in touch with all of the industries in that industrial complex. We actually set up a meeting with the industries and collected samples to get volatile fatty acid concentrations, etc., so that Johnson County could have a good idea of what the strength was going to be of the particular solids. And so it was, some good synergies there. That 13 cents per gallon for hauling has went up. I think we're probably closer to 16 to 20, depending on where you're at. And I am not aware of any cogen facilities in the Northwest. Since I've done most of my work in the Northwest on the industrial side, I have not been much on the municipal side. I'm not
Turn this
aware
up
of
right
any
now.
in the Northwest.
Hurry up, I'm
So,
getting ready to close it.
Hey, Ari, go ahead and mute your mic, Ari. Sorry about that,
Oh, I'm
Stacy.
sorry.
oh no, that's okay. So I'm sure that there are some facilities, and I can certainly do some investigation if that is something warranted. But I do think that both looking at feedstocks for cogen and also feedstocks for biological nutrient removals should be on municipals' radar.
All right. Okay, so the next question is about specific recommendations to um, industries, or in this case, for a brewery. So it reads, in some of the other presentations, it was stated that a particular treatment process for an industry could not be recommended by the municipal pretreatment inspector, so as not to be um, playing favorites with the wastewater treatment companies. Is it okay to recommend equalization tanks for a brewery?
So, I would, if it were me, I would say yes, but you certainly need to talk amongst yourself on. I'm sure municipalities might act differently. Here is the scenario that I have experienced. So having worked for Johnson County as a Johnson County employee, and then going into industry, I had just really great relationships with Johnson County, and they weren't allowed, to obviously say, hey, go to Stacy to get help. But what they could say is, there's a facility that is it has installed a treatment process that's working really, and why don't you go and take a look at it? And I know that Robert mentioned in his talk that sometimes industries are very skeptical about letting other industries come in and take a look at things. That's certainly true on the actual manufacturing side of things, but typically the wastewater side of things, there's nothing that's really proprietary about that for the industry, and it's usually segregated, so they would be able to visit the wastewater treatment side of things and not be exposed to any of the production side of things. So that's how I have been called upon to help in scenarios with regulators saying, hey, take a look at this. I think that equalization is not a proprietary process. So and it's not really treatment, right? So that's why I would say that that you would be able to recommend that. But like I said, you would need to vet that internally with your leadership. But I can understand specific treatment processes and specific types of equipment, like suppliers. I definitely, and engineers for that matter. You have to definitely keep that code of silence.
Gotcha. Yeah, great answer. There's a lot of new folks to pretreatment around the nation. So um, really good feedback from you. With that, there's another question asking you to expand upon discrete sampling. It reads, I'm new to pretreatment. What is discrete sampling?
Okay, so discrete sampling is you have the same sampling unit, but instead of the samples all going into one bottle, there are 24 separate bottles. And you can program the sampler based on flow or based on time, and then it'll switch to the new bottle, every hour. And it can be flow based, so it can vary in that regard. But typically what I do is I take 15 samples every 15 minutes. And so I'll get 4 samples in a bottle, and then for the 24-hour period. So then what that allows me to do is I can look at it and say, okay, what changed over that 24-hour period? And can, I can, I can, test those all, individually. Sometimes I'm just looking at them for visual, because for a municipality, they want to see those slug loads. They want to see when they happen, and do they happen all the time, weekly or daily, and you can visually see what happens every hour over that 24-hour period, and that's where they're effective.
Okay, we do have one more question that I'll get to, and two comments. So I see here that some attendees have chimed in that Spokane has a cogen at their treatment plant, and so does the city of Medford in Oregon, and Spokane is in Washington State. So the final question for you, yeah, it's interesting to know. Final question for you reads, what would be the best treatment for dairy or ice cream, etc., processed wastewater stream or processed wastewater discharge?
So that can vary substantially. There are a lot of options, and it's really dependent on how clean the wastewater needs to be. I'm a fan that if there is a municipality that can handle the loading from an industry, putting biological treatment on a industry is, it's a tough thing to operate, and it's an expensive thing to operate. And as we discussed, they're not in the business of wastewater operations. They're in the business of making whatever product it is they produce. And so you've got to recognize that the more difficult the operation is, the more likely that issues are going to occur. So it depends on what the downstream limitations are. And it can vary. So a lot of times what we will do is we'll do an alternatives evaluation, and we will look at, primary treatment. Can we just get away with a skimmer, DAF, just physical chemical treatment? And then we will add in, should we do aerobic treatment? Should we do anaerobic treatment? Should we do anaerobic low rate treatment? Should we do anaerobic high rate treatment? There's a lot of options. And so typically we usually do an alternative analysis that might have, 4, 5, 6 options. And then based on where your effluent lies and your capital investment, then the client can make a choice on how to move forward. And a lot of times, the pre-treatment coordinators do get involved in that decision-making process. And I certainly encourage that to be part of the discussion if the industries are willing to share that information and to get not only the pre-treatment coordinators, but the downstream wastewater treatment operators or the leaders that run that facility to be involved in that as well. So long answer, but there's many options.
No, we really appreciate you taking the time to go into such detail. It's very valuable to our group. So I wanted to share before I let you go, Stacy, because I know the presenters cannot see the polls or the poll results. And I think this was a really great question that you asked. And so I wanted to give you the opportunity to hear the results. So your question was, and for some reason it's not popping up, so I'm not seeing. So the question was, yeah. So what is your biggest pre-treatment headache? And 3% of the attendees indicated flow. 36% said fog. 23% said organic loading. 17% said priority pollutants, and 22% indicated other. So that's kind of a neat question, and wanted to share the results
I'd like
with
to
you.
know the 22% that said other, or what the other was. if anybody can pop in the chat and type a few things, that would be helpful.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, folks, if you clicked other, chime in. I have someone saying baby wipes already.
I figured wipes is going to probably be across the, yep, bragging. So
Bragging.
Yes.
TDS chlorides, pH.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So it sounds like, some brewery stuff.
I, I think we
Permittees
can
who
hook that
don't
part of the
take
poll.
compliance seriously.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
okay. Well, thank you again so much, Stacy, for joining us today. It was a real treat to hear your presentation. And so we'll go ahead, folks, and welcome Eric Martinson uh, to our webinar today. Eric, welcome and thank you so much for joining us. I may have you muted. It says you are self-muted, Eric. So there you go. Hello there and welcome. Oh, we're still not hearing you. Let me just double check that I don't have you muted on my end. Oh,
How about now?
I can hear you. Hey.
Okay. Hey, good morning. All right.
Good
I'm
morning.
going to try to show my screen. I've got two screens going, so I don't know which one is going to
Okay, I'll let you
self-populate.
know which one we see. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we see your Outlook inbox.
What if I drag that over?
Now we see
Now that. All right. So we
yep.
will get out of that mode and we'll try to go full screen here. Let's
All
see.
right. While you're getting that started up,
Yeah.
I'm just going to remind folks that if they miss the poll, go ahead and email me directly. And, I have a couple folks asking for a break, a bathroom break. So I think while you get that set up, Eric, maybe we'll just
Yep.
take a minute or two to give folks the opportunity to run to the restroom. And
That's fine.
we'll start your presentation at 9:15. So
Sounds good.
if you've got to pop away, folks, make it quick. We're still seeing it in presenter mode.
Yeah, let me
Okay.
go over here. Let's see. I've got it. Let me bring this one over. That's a problem with doing two screens, I guess, huh?
Yeah, most
Right.
of the folks that have joined us have had to work through this as well. So you're not alone.
All right.
We're all pretty new to virtual presentations. So
Let me see here.
let's see.
Unless I'm just being display settings.
If you hit swap under Okay, everyone, welcome back. I hope you had a chance to grab some warm coffee or run to the bathroom if you needed to. I do have some confirmations and some emails coming in about polling, so thank you so much for understanding and making the adjustment there. If you emailed me, we will update your records. Next, we have Bree Hulls with the City of Portland, Oregon, coming to share with us about a case study, another case study. Hey, Bree, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for the invite too. I appreciate it. I'm excited to share the story with y'all.
Yeah, well, we see your screen, so
Okay.
whenever you're ready, we will. We're anxious to hear what went down over in Portland.
Yeah, I enjoyed the presentations thus far. I actually worked with Eric Martinson on the TFC case. I was doing the civil enforcement side for TFC. I think in total they ended up paying probably close to 6 figures in penalties.
Oh wow, we did have a couple comments saying that, you know, the penalties and the fees associated with the criminal case didn't seem like it. They were more than, you know, what it would have cost
Yeah,
to transport the waste, but it sounds like in the end it was a
right, with
pretty
the
good chunk.
criminal, civil, and
I see.
yeah, with everything combined, it added up quite a bit. Right now, they were a categorical industrial user that was discharging, and city code and rules state that we have to regulate categorical industries regardless of discharge. So once they cease discharging, we just issued them a non-discharging categorical industrial user permit, and that just requires them to haul all their wastewater off and keep records. So that's being managed by Matt Rollins right now, who chimed in to the chat earlier.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, just some background on that one. That one actually happened right after this Oregon Oils case. I think I had maybe a 2-month breather between the two investigations. All right, but I'll dive into this one. Some background on myself. I started after college working at a large pulp and paper manufacturer, monitoring, overseeing their environmental compliance. They had over 6 environmental permits, and then I came to City of Portland. In the pretreatment program, I had anywhere between 30 and 45 industrial wastewater discharge permits I was sort of overseeing the compliance for. Today's presentation is about one of those, which is Oregon Oils. They are an SIU, or were an SIU. And I'll go over some background and then what started the investigation and the investigation findings, what were the outcomes. I'll go over the enforcement and penalties, and then I'll talk about what's happening now later. Okay, so diving in. Okay, so here is a snapshot of Northwest Portland. So the red lines are the sanitary sewer lines, and then the green lines are the storm drains, and about 40% of Portland's system is combined. So that's what these purple lines are. And now Oregon Oils is this facility highlighted here. You can see that the combined line sort of dead ends here and ends up flowing up this road to the pump station called Yeon, and that ends up pumping over to our wastewater treatment plant. Okay, so some background on Oregon Oils. They began in 2011. I started with BES in late 2016, so it already had a lot of history behind it. And so at the time they had about 20 employees. Their main operations included used cooking oil collection. So they would, collect that used cooking oil from fryers primarily, and they would bring it back, remove. It didn't really collect too many solids, but any solids and water would be removed and then sold to biodiesel suppliers in the area. Another business operation of theirs was collecting waste from grease removal devices. And this was at a cost to them because they had to treat it for solids and remove water, and then it was discharged to a combined sewer system under the permit, which was issued in April of 2012. So they were issued a significant industrial user wastewater discharge permit, and it really wasn't because of their volume, because they were discharging about 10,000 gallons per day or less. It was really because of their potential to discharge, you know, the solid viscous material and cause obstruction in the sewer. So that permit had requirements to treat wastewater for pH and oil and grease, and discharge of solid viscous substances that obstruct the sewer is a prohibited discharge per city code. And we also had a temperature limitation of 149 degrees Fahrenheit. We're part of something called the Preferred Pupper Program, which is this regional program that has specific standards for cleaning out those grease traps and interceptors, and then reporting all their information to the program to be essentially in this list of good businesses in the area that perform this work. And here are just some examples. So this is just a cooking, you've probably seen these before, but this is a fryer, and this is a small grease trap. So this is what they would be removing. Okay, some compliance history. I know these are distracting. I'll get to those in a second. Okay, so like I said, I started in 2016, but it already had some history behind it, so I'll go over that right now. From 2011 to 2013, they just had one pH violation and one late report. This is pretty standard for that amount of time. In 2014, started seeing fog issues, so fats, oils, and grease. I'm just going to say fog for now on, at Yeon Pump Station. They did some CCTV work, and they found that fog was coming from the lateral right outside Oregon Oils. So here's just an image of what that fog looked like in, I think this is the effluent well of the Yeon Pump Station. And I wish I could show the video because it was just completely sludgy. It's like unlike anything I've ever seen or smelled before. So they were issued a notice of violation, and that was $1,800 for that prohibited discharge of fog. And they were issued a compliance order to cease those discharges and improve treatment. Once they improved treatment and ceased those discharges, in 2016, the problem came back. So we did the same thing. We issued another NOB and another CO to, again, cease those discharges of fog. And we also required an engineering analysis of the treatment system. And then treatment would have to be improved depending on that report. And I remember that report basically saying their treatment system was adequate enough, if operated correctly, to not cause these issues. However, I performed numerous inspections of the facility, and in 2017, they had a small DAF unit, and I realized that that was extremely undersized. It had maybe a 5 gallon per minute rating, and it was not adequate enough for their treatment system, nor was being used properly. I would ask them about, you know, what coagulants, flock they were using, and they didn't really know, which was kind of a red flag for me anyway. In 2017, the problem came back. And so, well, we said, we're gonna issue another CO, or you can voluntarily agree to a compliance agreement. So this is a voluntary compliance agreement. And that was issued in about April of 2017. And it required them to make pre-treatment upgrades, including a centrifuge, by December of 2017. And then after that, the 90-day show compliance period would start. And this would be a period of time they just cannot discharge any fog. If it was found, it would be an immediate class 1 violation. So, and here's right outside their lateral, you can see just the gunk built up. And I know fog and And one of the answers said like 36% of you, this was a major issue. And this is just what it does. It clogs the sewer lines and can cause major interferences with the treatment system. So in 2017, these were the upgrades they made to their treatment system. And I'll just go through those two streams with you right now. So that one stream was grease trap waste. It would be unloaded into a trommel screen. And there's another screen right here. And then it would filter out those solids from the wastewater portion. The solids would be hauled off, and the solids would be heated in this pit for further separation. There were a few heated tanks in here. I just didn't diagram all of them. And this one, because I had to make it pretty quick. And then the wastewater would flow then to the centrifuge, which was brand new and had a rating to remove 99% of that oily phase greasy water from the waste stream, and then also remove solids. Solids again were hauled off, and that was actually hauled off to a digester. And so the lighter phase water would end up being heated again. We had some lime injected to control the pH and to oxidize and break any of those emulsions. And it was mixed continuously and then sent to a storage tank. And you can follow the line. They had continuous monitoring at this point of accommodation for pH prior to the bag filter. And then the bag filter would discharge through a flow meter, which was required so we could accurately measure the sewer volume discharging to the city. And then it would flow through our point of compliance sampling point. So this was the point the city's field crew could come out and collect samples for pH and oil and grease. And then it discharged into this below ground sump and then out to us and to the combined system. So this was their main waste stream. And then any cooking oil that was collected was screened. There was not as many solids, but it was still screened and heat separated to remove the water phase from the waste stream, and then sent through a vibratory drum screen, a much smaller centrifuge, and then to these oil holding tanks, which were sent to a biodiesel facility. So here's just some photos of what their pretreatment system looked like after the upgrades. I didn't diagram everything, but these were the main ones. So this is that trommel screen where they would back up their truck and hook it up and unload that grease trap waste directly into the screen, which would separate the solids out into this dumpster. And then any wastewater would dump into this heated pit, go back into those heated tanks, get further screened and heated and phase separated. And then eventually went to this new centrifuge powered by a motor. Just the horizontal centrifugal force would further the phase separation, remove very fine particulates. And then that would discharge back to this line through their point of accommodation, through this bag filter, through the flow meter, and then there's a spigot for our sampling connection. And this is that sump. And so this sump ends up flowing out to the City of Portland system. It should be noted that prior to this point, all of these connections could be modified. So anything, really any of these connections could be modified to their liking because they were flexible hosing and not fixed pipes. So that was also a concern for us. So with that permit renewal that I mentioned in 2017, we kind of used that as an opportunity to add more stringent permit requirements. So one of them was they were required to install a monitoring access structure. And that basically just makes our sampling point representative, safe, and secure. Secure meaning either in a below ground manhole or sampling vault, or it would be enclosed by like a 3x3x3 box that had a lock on it. So if we were to hook up a composite sampler, it would make it just harder to tamper with. And you can find those rules. Just look up Administrative Rule ANB 4.35 if you want to see all the requirements. Another requirement we added to the permit was a requirement to notify us of each batch discharge. So essentially, it is what it sounds like. We required them, instead of just discharging daily, we wanted them to retain their wastewater and then give us a 48-hour notification via email that indicated volume, time and date, and then a contact. So we could essentially go out, so field ops, our sampling crew could essentially go through the emails and pick a date that works for them to go out and sample. Another thing is we just increased monitoring both on the city side and the self-monitoring side. And I started taking a closer look at their analytical results, and this was sort of what I was seeing. So our effluent yielded non-detects every time. And that was an immediate red flag, because there were industries in Portland that had more robust treatment systems that were getting detections. And so it's just really a point for you to kind of look closer at the analytical data. And then I compared that to the sample that we collected from Neon Pump Station, and many, many times higher. You can see that it was broken up between non-polar and total oil and grease, and it was quite significantly mainly polar grease, which would be from those vegetable oils and the grease trap waste, or rather than petroleum-based waste. So once they installed treatment, and once everything was nearing completion of their voluntary compliance agreement, we decided to essentially give them a fresh start. So we ended up cleaning the sewer lateral and doing another TV inspection to verify the cleaning. And then I increased my compliance inspection. I did unannounced and announced throughout that entire period, especially when they were completing portions of the VCA. All right, so that VCA ended in December of 2017. Sorry, I'm throwing a lot of dates at you, but it is, the timeline's pretty important. There was a lot of moving pieces. So the VCA ended, and that 90-day show compliance period starts. And we had about a break, like a 1 month break, before our pump station maintenance crew went back to Yeon Pump Station and found fog was back. So this is the influent of the well at the pump station. So you could see that the fog layers sort of just floating at the surface there. And so we decided, okay, well, it's most likely Oregon oils, but maybe there's another IU out there. So we started an investigation starting at Yeon Pump Station and working our way back upstream to see if maybe we were missing something. Okay, so here's the investigation site. So here's Yeon Pump Station, and here's the combined sewer system that ends up going back to Oregon Oils. So here's Oregon Oils facility. There's a galvanizing company over here. This is a brewery. There weren't really any major restaurants or anything capable of discharging fog at that volume. There was a metal fab shop across the street and a seafood industry right here as well that tied into that main line. And I went to go perform an inspection at the seafood industry, and they had maybe a household size boiler, and they had one filleting station to fillet fish, and all solids were removed, and I didn't really notice any discernible amount of oil on the ground or in the sumps, and it just didn't seem like they were capable of discharging at those volumes either.
This is her.
Okay, so just blowing that up a little bit.
Okay. Okay. My husband's it. Okay. No.
Sorry, I'm
And
somebody else.
might be on one. So let me just call him. I'll let him know. You're going to do it right now?
Someone want to mute their mic?
Yeah, I'll give him a heads up right now.
Hi there. We
Okay.
see, let's see. I don't see it's anyone.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that was. Okay, I'll just continue. Okay, so blowing up this section here. Here's the downstream manhole that we found. That would be a good place to start.
They're replacing our meter.
And here's an upstream manhole that we would want to also investigate. So that sump I was mentioning is located right here. And this is the discharge point that connects, it goes up and then takes a sharp right and connects to this black line right here. So there wasn't a manhole directly at that connection, but we did find those upstream and downstream ones to investigate. And this one is tying in from the metal fab and seafood restaurant. And then this line here is from their domestic uses. Okay, so we did start off at Yan Pump Station, like I said. So we deployed a temperature probe with a game camera, which was actually new to us. We thought that that would be a good way to kind of see if there was an influx of maybe discolored wastewater coming into the pump station. Maybe we could see the fog coming in. That was sort of our thought. So we deployed both of those and we installed it for about a week. And this is what we found. So we pulled those results and we saw spikes in temperature. And remember, our limit is 149 degrees Fahrenheit. So we had just one exceedance there. And you could see that there were these periodic spikes of temperature. And the game camera took photos every 5 minutes. And so I went through the entire log and I found that when there was this inflow of, it's kind of hard to see in the photo, but it was clear to see on the full screen, where there was this influx of white kind of discoloration in the wastewater. And I lined that up. I saw that those periods of white flow was lining up with the temperature almost exactly. All right, so moving back upstream, back to the sewer line right in front of Oregon Oils, we decided to also install the game cameras and temperature probes upstream and downstream. And we found that temperature exceeded the 149 degree limit 5 times on the downstream probe. So here are those 5 events. We actually kept it in there for about 2 months, but we were pulling the results. I think it was every 1 to 2 weeks we would pull results. And this is just because we didn't get the probe until later. And you can kind of see that this purple line is the upstream results. And this is when we start getting into the warmer months of March. And you can see that it kind of correlates with the background levels. And then this blue line was the downstream manhole. And you can kind of see that there were those 5 instances where it was above 149 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can kind of see that the weekends didn't really see that at all. And it correlated pretty much with the upstream. And this business operated Monday through Friday almost every week. They work Saturdays once in a while, but it correlated almost exactly to that. So it should be noted, around the 2nd week of February, we knew there had to have been some sort of illicit discharges going on, especially since we weren't getting those batch discharge notifications as required by their permit. So we decided to let the EPA Criminal Investigations Division know. And so yeah, about mid-February, we let them know what we were doing, and they said, well, keep doing it, gather more data and provide it to us. We'll work on getting a warrant to maybe do a raid of the facility. So we continued our investigation, and what we found was the game cameras deployed upstream and downstream showed a significant difference. So here's upstream, here's the temperature probe, and it pretty much looked like this at all times. It was a very, very low flow. Like I said, that combined sewer sort of dead-ended at that end of the street. So there wasn't really a lot of influx of wastewater upstream. And this is pretty much how it looked like all the time. But then downstream, this is right after Oregon Oils and that downstream manhole, you saw that just that influx of discolored material, and you can see the lenses sort of condensating from the heat. So we needed to confirm that that wastewater contained oil and grease just to really give us more evidence. And so we deployed these ISCO composite samplers, and we put them both upstream and downstream to gather comparisons. And then we set the programmer to pull between 3:30 and 7 a.m. That's typically when we saw that discolored wastewater. So that's typically when we saw its discharge. Okay, and those results. So we had it pull each day during the week, and these were the results that we got. So this US is upstream, GS is downstream, and you can just see that there's a significant difference in the averages of these pollutants. So BOD was less than 100, COD less than 160, and then TSS was 66. Oil and grease was actually non-detect. And you can see the oil and grease, this would be total oil and grease, was about 3,000. TSS was 17,000. And COD was 38, and then BOD was 29. And these are all milligrams per liter. And from Stacy's presentation earlier, 3,000 was actually the oil and grease concentration of half and half. So that's pretty significant to be directly discharged to our system. So here's just an example. Sorry to gross you guys out, but here's a sample that we collected from Yeon Pump Station. You could just see that it's a solid, essentially. Like, this is so thick and completely interfered with our pump station. So it required a lot of work on the pump station maintenance crew's part to kind of go through and clean it out. And then here are some examples of the upstream and downstream composite samples. So this is a pretty representative sample of the upstream composite sample we collected. And then this one is the downstream sample. So significant difference. All right, so summarizing everything that we found that it discharged between 3:30 and 7. We correlated that with temperature spikes and the elevated volume and those discolored discharges. And we found that that also correlated with the elevated pollutant results. And another note is our pump station maintenance crew, we call them PUMA, they had to go out 1 to 2 times per week to Yeon Pump Station to clean it out, which was about 4 times higher than they had to do with any other pump station in the area. And they kept logs, and this one was just kind of the highlight for me. It says they flushed sides A and B, and they said the goo was back, which was also an indication that it was causing interference. So all this physical evidence really supported the claims that they were discharging in the early morning without submitting those discharge notifications to us. And that means that their self-monitoring reports, which summarized the batch discharge notifications and analytical, was falsified. And I did mention, like, to accurately charge their discharge volume. So normally, I'll just back up a second. Normally, someone would be charged their sewer based off of their incoming flow. So it would be in out, because like 99% of what you use is just charged back to the sanitary system. So they use that sewer volume. But since they were bringing all this waste in, the out would be several times higher than the incoming flows. So we required them to have that flow meter installed and report those meter reads to us monthly. And since that wasn't lining up either, we realized that they had to have been bypassing the meter and falsifying those sub-meter reports to us. And this would have been a significant cost savings for them if they were bypassing all of this, not to mention just the sewer disposal costs, but also the extra strength grates that would have been assessed on that sewer volume. All right, so at the same time during this, it went on so long really because the criminal investigation side needed more data to have enough information to obtain a warrant. So we kept it going until about April. So it started late January to April. And we kept them up to date on our investigation findings. So EPA CID, the Criminal Investigations Department, worked with Oregon State Police in obtaining that warrant. And we met with them we started a 1 a.m. briefing on April 19th so it was EPA CID, Oregon State Police, BS staff. So it was Dan, my manager, myself, a couple of field operations crew members, and then those two groups. So we briefed for about an hour, and then we waited outside their facility essentially, and I didn't have a vest or anything, but the CID and state police ended up raiding the facility first at 6 or a little bit prior to 6. And they presented their search warrant and immediately started interviewing employees and seizing computer files, hard files, phones, just for information on these illicit discharges. And they called me in later with field ops around 6, and I walked through the facility to record any illicit discharge connections, what their treatment system hookups look like, and just anything to help support our case. And this is what we found. There was unfortunately no active discharge of wastewater. There wasn't essentially a smoking gun at the time. I think maybe we went in a little bit too early or too late. But I did see that the pretreatment system piping was completely disconnected, and it wasn't laid about in a way that we had diagrammed prior. I did notice that their centrifuge had been completely dry and empty. I'm talking bone dry. They have not been using their centrifuge. And we also performed a dye test with field ops to kind of confirm that that sump discharges to just that downstream manhole. So we verified that for EPA and OSP. So we really just dumped some powder dye in, flushed some clean water through, and then we had someone staged at the downstream manhole and then just wait for the green dye to show up. So we confirmed that. And we ended up we ended up leaving, got it around 9. And then EPA and the state police continued their search until about 1. But in the months following, they really needed as much information as possible. So I just sent them all of the requested materials to help support their criminal side. So these were just like cooperative investigations going, and we were working together, but ES was really sharing evidence with CID and not the other way around. Okay. So investigation outcomes. So literally after that same morning, I went back to the office and we issued them a notice of termination of their wastewater discharge permit. So it revokes that authorization to discharge wastewater to the combined system. So this is just a snapshot of what that looked like. And then later, I decided to go home because that had been a very long day. And later, I ended up writing 104 notices of violations. They were broken up into 6 different classes, each with multiple occurrences in just that investigation period. I guess we could have, elaborated and gone back a couple years, but we thought it would build a more solid case if it was just that investigation period. And then on the extra strength and sewer charge side, we have an extra strength and sewer charge group, a separate group, and they did a billing adjustment for those January to April findings. I'll go through that in a second. So here is the enforcement and penalty summary. So those are those 6 different categories. So they discharged without the batch discharge notification as required by their permit. And that happened 41 times in that time period. We found those 5 temperature exceedances, which were just general discharge prohibitions in our code. We counted 40 times of discharge of solid viscous material during a voluntary compliance agreement. And we counted 11 times of pump station interference. So that was 11 times the pump station crew had to go out and clean pump station. And it should be noted that these 3 at the bottom were just tapped out because our code says that we can only assess a civil penalty of up to $10,000 per day for each violation. So these would have been higher. And then those 3 months of falsified reports and those 3 months of falsified submeter reports. And that was a grand total of 238,500. And that was just the pretreatment side. The extra strength side was quite different. So we did conservatively estimate the flow with Manning's equation. And that really just estimates the flow rate using in a open channel pipe using the wetted surface area and change in height, and also takes into effect the roughness of the pipe. So we actually calculated it to be about 32,000 gallons on average per discharge event. And some more calculations to calculate average BOD rates on the discharge, and that ended up being 227,000. And then on the average TSS rate that we calculated for the discharge was 187,000. And just on the base sewer volume charge for like what any industrial or commercial user would pay on just their sewer charge was an additional 17,000. And so extra strength side was 432,600. And that makes the grand total 671,000 for pretreatment extra strength. So at the same time, we were doing our civil enforcements. They were also conducting their criminal enforcements. So note that we just enforce city code, our admin rules, and those wastewater discharge permits. And the Department of Justice works with EPA on conducting those criminal enforcements. And what ended up happening with them, Oregon Oils actually pled guilty to Oregon State Police and EPA. And they were charged with the owner was charged 2 misdemeanor charges to the 2nd degree of water pollution under this code. And they were sentenced 2 years of probation. Unfortunately, on our side, they requested an admin review on the extra strength charges and violations we issued. We ended up issuing them a settlement agreement, and it included another voluntary compliance agreement, and we agreed to that, to reducing the extra strength charges by 132,000. So the revised total civil penalty between our 2 groups was 538,000. and that was going to be split between 2 payments. So accepted the new voluntary compliance agreement conditions. So it essentially said this. So we revoked their wastewater discharge permit, and the VCA we issued afterwards said, you're going to refrain from discharging. You're actually prohibited from discharging until another permit is issued. And until that's done, you have to provide documentation to us. I think it's monthly or quarterly. That is all the facilities you serviced and grease traps, waste removed and gallons removed, and the location of the disposal with invoices. So they've been hauling it off to Clean Water Services, facility in Hillsborough, and Tillamook's digester as well. So they've been hauling those off at those digesters. And then if they do want a new industrial wastewater discharge permit, they never actually installed a MOS as required by their permit. So they would have to do that. And so it would have to capture all wastewater discharges, including domestic, just to eliminate the potential to bypass. Again, have a flow meter. And then we would require flow proportional sampling on in that MOS. And then they would have to install more robust pre-treatment equipment, and that has to be signed off of PE by a PE. We would also require that the system be hard piped. And then if they failed to comply, we would reinstate the full charge. Okay, so definitely I was pretty new. I was about 2 years in, and I definitely gained a lot of experiences. This was my first investigation, and what I found was just thoroughly review the analytical data. Like it was a big red flag just to see that they were getting non-detects for an industry that has not a perfectly well operated treatment system, if at all. And then, industries in the same sector with more robust treatment were actually getting, detections, between 10 and 50 milligrams per liter of oil and grease. So it just didn't add up to me. And then modify permits to add those more stringent requirements. We got kind of lucky that it was a permit renewal, but there should be, some language in your code or rules that allow you to modify permits. And then explore different investigation techniques. We did order the game cameras, and that was actually super helpful, especially with calculating calculating the extra strength results. And then just make sure you have continuous monitoring equipment on hand, because you kind of don't know when there's going to be a bad actor like this and you have to start some investigation work. And then, yeah, just sample. And there's probably some more things I learned from here, but those were the main ones. I mean, they were trying to save a significant amount of money on their sewer and extra strength costs. So there was incentive for them to bypass their treatment system and and their flow meter. Definitely a team effort. There was a lot of coordination in this project. So I'm in pre-treatment, and this was my IU, and definitely worked with FOG, and then some investigation techniques from some other groups, and then field operations in the lab were super helpful in just sampling and analyzing on a moment's whim. And then definitely worked with the city attorney when that admin review was called, and then develop a better relationship with your pump station maintenance crew, because they can let you know if they're seeing something weird in a pump station or collection system, and just keeping that line of communication open. And then it was great working with getting that experience to work with EPA and Oregon State Police, Department of Justice on their criminal side of things. So that was new to me as well. Anyway, thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Sorry about that. I'm having technical issues today, guys. So thanks, Brittany. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Can anyone hear me? Okay. Great. We do have a few questions for you, Brittany, if you have some time.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Let's see, we'll try to start at the top.
Okay.
So someone asked that you mentioned at the beginning having a workload of about 35 permittees. This particular IU seems to be time consuming. Does your program manage or how do you manage all of your sites, especially during an investigation?
Yeah, so at this time I was a permit writer and I was issued, I think at this point, when I first started, it was 45 IUs. About half of them were significant. At this point of this investigation, it was around 30, I believe. And it was difficult to manage, honestly, just the additional workload. There was another there was another fog instance with a food manufacturer, and I sort of had to give that up with another. I gave that to another permit manager to kind of lighten my load so I can focus on the Oregon Oils investigation. So that really helped, like, move stuff around if you have other permit managers. Right now, I'm a permit writer, so and Oregon Oils doesn't actively have a permit right now, so that's been a huge help. Yeah, right after this is when tech finishes started. So I had again, that 2-month break to get caught up on work. And then we got that whistleblower from TFC and they
Oh,
just happened
wow.
to be both my permits. So it was a very, very busy year. And I think I got like 50 gray hairs from it.
Oh my. How much court time did you have to participate in for this investigation?
So I didn't actually have to participate in court. There was always that threat that it was going to go to code hearings, but it never did. We had that settlement agreement, like I mentioned, and that was just, we had that administrative review, but that's done in-house. And then it had that threat to go to code hearings, but it never did.
Okay, great. Let's see.
Oh, I should
Someone's
note.
asking. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to note that, I think the biggest indicator in all this is Yeon Pump Station hasn't had any interference since we've done this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was pretty black and white on our end.
Sure, yeah. Someone's asking why you didn't do site inspections earlier when the field crew first noticed the problem. Or
I
did you? Perhaps?
did. Yeah, I was out there a few times each year at least. So, but as I said, I didn't go when they were actively discharging, because they're kind of a batch treatment. So when I happened to go, they just weren't discharging, even with those unannounced. I really wanted to catch them red-handed, so I did try to go out, but it just didn't end up going that way.
Sure, yeah. Someone's asking if you could share what type of temperature probe was used and what kind of ISCO sampler model, and then thirdly, a question about the camera that was suitable for an NEMO 4 environment, and yeah, maybe that would be separate, but yeah,
Yeah,
we're wondering about the equipment you used.
so I don't know the make and models, but I can definitely get those for the sampling equipment we used and the temperature probe. Our program's so big, we break up who does the sampling and who does the inspections and compliance. So on pretreatment, we kind of keep those separate. And then with the game camera, it's just a normal game camera you would buy for hunting.
Okay. And do you consider those disposable, or are you able to use them?
No, we were able to reuse them.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. So someone asked who required the centrifuge to be installed. They noted that it seemed unusual for a pretreatment coordinator or pretreatment staff to specify a type of treatment?
Yeah. If I had more time, I would have elaborated a little bit more on that, but they did submit another engineering report and pre-treatment plan essentially, and the plan included installation of a centrifuge, and we just essentially approved the plan since it said it would remove oils and solids to 99%. So we just
Okay.
certified their plan.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Before, like, so as a part of the VCAs, did Portland design the pretreatment system, or did the permittee? Oh, and you just answered that. Sorry. With the engineering report.
Mhm. Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah. So in our area, they're required to submit an engineering report, and that's what's reviewed and approved. Let's see. Did you have any suspicions about the facility based on discussions with staff or management at the facility, or was it strictly because of the physical and analytical information you were being provided?
Yeah, I can speak a little to this. Like, both with TFC and organ oils, you kind of know in your gut that something's off, and doing this investigation just confirmed that. I try to be as unbiased as possible. That's why I wanted to start back at Yeon Pump Station, because I was new. I'm like, okay, I know they have this history, but it's my apartment now, so I want to start fresh. So it's like, that's why I started back at Yeon and kind of worked my way upstream, and that we just found ourselves at organ oils again. And that's really what it was. It was just confirming that already gut instinct.
Okay, I see. Well, I think that wraps up all the questions. There are a couple folks just wondering about the treatment that was required and the clarification that it was approved through the engineering report
Mhm.
was helpful. A couple folks are very new, saying that they're so new that they just wanted some clarification there. One final question that you could talk to, and then we'll wrap it up. Someone's asking, what is MAS? MAS? A couple
Oh,
slides back.
so MOS is monitoring access structure, and that's a rule that we have. It's under Administrative Rule 4.35. So if you Google that, Administrative Rule 4.35, and then maybe City of Portland after that, it should be the first one to pop up, and it will go through the requirements of the sampling point. So it's the city's sampling point and making sure that that sampling location is representative, it's in a safe area, and if we put a composite sampler in there, it can be secured.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay, well, thank you. Again, thanks so much for being so generous with your time today, Bree, and joining us here at the workshop.
Yeah.
It was a really great story to follow, case study to follow along. So,
Thank you.
yeah. All right. Well, we are going to introduce the next presentation, a duo from the city of Everett here in Washington State. But before I welcome them on, I wanted to mention a lot of you folks are joining us from the Pacific Northwest, and you are familiar with, if you have anything to do with your FOG program, you're likely familiar with the Western States Alliance. It's an organization that works with local sewer agencies to develop and help to develop FOG programs and help folks implement best management practices. Let's see. So I've pulled up their website here. We wanted to let the group as a whole know that Western States Alliance, they hold a FOG forum every year, which is really, really great. And this year they are planning to have the FOG forum, in 2021, they're planning to have the FOG forum as a virtual event. So, tune in for more information. If you would like to uh, participate in this virtual event, do sign up for to receive communication. I think you do that through the newsletter, but I can circle back if I'm wrong. But this is the website, westernstatesalliance.org, all typed out. And here's a short blurb about the FOG Forum in 2021. It's likely going to be in April, so we hope to see you guys then. And also, as I unmute Jean Bennett, and let's see, and Charles Johnstone, I did want to see if they wanted to, or if Jean wanted to make a plug for the National Pretreatment Group, and I can certainly list the link to the group's IO on our chat box for those of you who didn't notice it or weren't here the other day when we listed it. Well, welcome, Charlie and Jean. Thanks for your time today.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yay! All right.
Can you hear me?
So
I can hear you, yes.
I'm here. Greetings.
let's see, display settings. Nope, that's not what we wanted.
It's a little unusual. We can see your GoToWebinar box, which I don't think we've been able to see that from any of the other folks, presenters who have shared their screen. Usually that's hidden.
How's that?
We're seeing it in presenter mode or display. So where you had it before, to swap to, yep, that should give it to us. And there you go. All right, perfect.
Okay, and let's see.
Okay, yeah, well, welcome and thanks again for taking the time to share with us. Sounds like an interesting case study, and sounds like we'll learn a lot from it. So with that, I'll hand it over to you two.
Okay, I'll be doing all the slide changing. So when Charles is presenting, he'll be telling me when. Excuse me. And yeah, a little plug for the pretreatment coordinators group. It used to be the Yahoo group. People still refer to it as the Yahoo group. So you'll see my email shortly. If you're not on it and you would like to be, just send me an email and I will send it to you. So the Molybdenum Search Chronicle with a local limit subplot. All right, there we go. This is my contact information. And that's me. The hair and beard aren't pink anymore. They've gone back to their normal gray. And Charles with his information. You can contact either one of us. And Charles managed to find his first city ID. What is it, 30 years ago now, 32 years?
That would have been August of '88, and I have a lot more than 50 gray hairs now.
Yeah. So why did we do this? Well, back about 18 months ago, we did 5-year trending for our biosolids, and here's the result we got. That peak there this is from our aeration cell number 2, which we'll describe later, and that peak is 74.5 milligrams per kilogram molybdenum. That means that the limit is 75. So we immediately started trying to identify the source. We looked at sources inside the plant to start with, and luckily this was a non-removal year. We do an annual or every 2-year removal of our biosolids. So when we dredged the following year, the composite molybdenum was about half the peak shown. It was in the 40s. So we evidently hit a hot spot when we were doing the sampling that year.
Our operations staff proceeded to sample in quadrants from that inventory, that particular removal. I believe they sampled about 48 times, and we did not get any more hits during that. So we were able to apply that batch.
Yeah. So our treatment plant is a combined trickling filter and solids contact plant and an aerated facultative lagoon system. Our rated flow is 40.3. Our average is 19.3, but we tend to peak at over 100 milligrams or million gallons per day. The mechanical plant has an average flow of just under 10 and a maximum of 15, and anything more than that is either discharged from the lagoon system or stored. Here's an aerial view of our treatment plant. Unfortunately, I can't get it to do any pointing, but with my setup, but at the north end discharge to the river from the lagoon system is just to the left into the river of that little chlorine contact channel you see at the top left. The mechanical plant is at the bottom left, and while it has a river discharge, that is currently mothballed, and it's pumped out to a deep water marine outfall. The biosolids removals are done from the aeration cell on the right at the bottom of the picture. That's where we store and digest our solids. Our collection system, we serve about 165,000 people. The north end of town, which was the sewer system was built pre-1960, is combined, about 6,500 acres. The south is separate. We have about 330 miles of pipe, 22 drainage basins, and 29 lift stations. So we've got a fairly extensive system. Here's a map of our system. You can see the combined area in the north, the separated system in the south. We have 3 wholesale customers: Silver Lake Water and Sewer District, Alderwood Water District, and the Mukilteo. We just get small portions of them. Silver Lake gives us a peak of 6.6. We treat essentially all of their sewage. Mukilteo, a very small portion, 1.6 MGD, and Alderwood Water and Wastewater, 1.5 MGD peak. They have their own treatment plant, plus they discharge to King County Metro.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Gene, but I believe that Silver Lake represents about a third of our average daily flow to the plant.
Yeah, about that. Okay, and now I'll turn it over to Charles, and we'll talk about how we've tried to find our molybdenum.
Thank you, Gene, and thank everyone for attending. As everything is this year, it's a little bizarre, and I think that Andrea and Raul and everyone has done a great job with this. I am humbled, and I learn a lot with these, and it makes me realize, although I've spent nearly 60% of my life in wastewater and water quality, that I have a lot to learn still. So as Gene said, I want to cover this part, and molybdenum is one of those things I never honestly thought about. I just remember it being the one of the hardest things on the periodic chart to pronounce, and so this has been really interesting. And I will have to say ahead of time that this is sort of like one of those TV shows we like to watch, where they get to the end of the season and you're excited, and then you realize that it's going to be a 2-parter, and you have to wait until next season to find out what happens. And that's kind of the way this is going for us. So initially, we need to look at concentration or loading. We don't have flow data on all the places where we would end up monitoring. So we chose concentration, and the flow metering had limitations, complications. So we chose concentration as the parameter that we could manage. We'll add flow data maybe in the future if we have it for appropriate locations. All right, Gene?
Yep.
We had other limitations. We only have so many samplers, and up until just a couple months ago, there were 3 of us. Gene is lead, and congrats to Gene once again on very deservedly being promoted to Everett's pretreatment manager. Now we just need to refill his position and get another inspector. We have lab capacity limitations. We're throwing a lot of samples at our metals chemist. So we settled on 3, and then we have to wait for reports for results, of course. So we have a lot of data already. We did have some historical issue with industrial users, a couple, but those were essentially ruled out because they had added treatment, and the metal finisher was not significant at that time. I don't know that that one's still around even, Gene.
Yeah, that's Railmakers.
Oh, okay. And by the way, both of our industrial laundries do now have treatment as a result of a compliance order a couple years ago. Okay. And Gene, you just chime in if I'm missing something anytime here. We also looked at our influent loading, lots of that, of course, but unfortunately we only had like 1 sample per day per quarter. The data was not adequate for this kind of an analysis. So we did some influent sampling for 14 days, middle of last year. And we did confirm it was coming in. And as Gene noted, it wasn't generated in the plant from use of, say, moly grease on our aerators. And so it wasn't consistent either. But that was our detection at first. And then this kind of dovetails into what Gene will talk about here with local limits, is that we needed to look at background data. And so we looked at several sites for 2-week periods, analyzed for the local limits purposes primarily, but also looking at Mo. And in all cases, we didn't find much. So the plant has 2 main input lines, one from the combined area, as Gene mentioned, and one from separate area. We found that the north end influent was at background and apparently not our source. South end showed slugs above 0.5 milligram per liter. And this is the first time we really actually saw, okay, this is a narrowed down point, not very narrow because the south end is a very large area. So at this point on, we just switched to, we're looking at metals. And here is the part of the south end of our plant, shows the headworks, and I cannot point either, but you can see, oh, let's go back a second.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. There's 2 dashed lines that come into the southwest corner of the headworks. Those are the force mains from our south interceptor. The 54-inch line that comes in the northwest corner of the headworks there is our north combined line. And then the large dashed line on the left top corner, that's our combined sewer line from the south end. Also, the two dashed lines that come diagonally across the lower left, those are from one of them is from is our discharge line for the 42-inch line for the south plant, and there is also the lines from Marysville. We take flow from Marysville during the low flow period. Just to give you an idea of where we're looking at. And so we're sampling at the influent of both the south and north ends. We found it in the south end. And the next, then we look at the first sub-basin, which is the 3 primary lines, the southwest, central, and oh, help me, Gene, the other interceptor. Southwest interceptor, central interceptor. And then essentially we sampled these, and one of them we had eliminated, which is the south end on the Silver Lake side, because it was one of our background sites. So at lift station 1, which is a major, our biggest lift station, and serves our industrial areas. And that's where we had a little bit higher slugs. So we're finding that this is the part of town where we're looking at. Lift station 1 is it's kind of near and dear. It's go ahead and go to the next one there, Gene. It's down at the base of a really neat little drive through the woods in Pigeon Creek 1 in Everett. And it's that blue thing in the lower left there. It's along the waterfront, right next to the railroad tracks. And I've always loved this site because I feel like I'm someplace different when I go there. Go to the next slide, if you would, Gene. I like to take pictures, as some people know. And so when we go down there early in the morning, I really like it for just a place. You're in the city, but you're driving through the woods to this neat spot. I'll go ahead and go next, Gene. This is also got some fun stuff. That's 1 day of sampler tubing in the lift station, a wet well at this site. So we had some fun there. Next. And then we looked at subbasins from lift station 1. And we sampled each of these in 2 separate sampling efforts for 2 weeks again. Most of them were near background again. We found one that we call the Gardner Vault site that had higher slugs yet. So we seem to be getting closer. This is just a shot of that neighborhood. It's a 24-inch line in a little neighborhood. Probably places built in the 60s, 70s. I think this line was put in the year I was born. Okay, so now we're in the Gardner Vault subbasin, and there are 3 major subbasins. We set up and we're going to sample them, and then what happened this year. And so after the initial shutdown, most of our users were closed. We did not see anything in those. And so that's kind of where we're getting to the what would be the last 10 minutes of the Star Trek episode, where everything wraps up, but instead it's more like TV now, where we're at that last episode of this season, and then we will be resuming. We're waiting for some data now. Go ahead and go to the next one, Gene. We wrapped up sampling at 4 separate sites with several lots of people back in business. So we're waiting for analysis at this point for these sites, and hopefully it'll give us an indication as to where to go further. And hopefully that's going to be that'll be our Thanksgiving gift. We'll be getting some of this data so we know where to go next. And that's where we do the to be continued part on our search, because it's not conclusive yet, but hopefully by next year it will be. And a few of the lessons we learned is you really need your team. You can't just assign something like this to a person. With only 3 of us, we had rotations where we worked weekends, and some of us, I think a couple of us, had stretches of 20+ days in a row working. Trend analysis is really important. We probably, this is maybe just my opinion, but I think we need to sample more, and it makes it tougher to do the field work and the analytical work. But I personally think more data is good data if it is good data. And enough said about the pandemic. COVID year 1. Let's hope there's not too many more. And Gene, you might want to add something else, but I think that is about what I had for now.
Yeah, that's where we are right now. From what I understand, the metals run has been done. We use ICP-MS in our lab here, and he runs in batches just to make the use of the instrument more efficient. So we're just waiting for the data to be approved and sent out to us. And then we'll figure out, we're hoping that one of those lines that we sampled this time is just Boeing. So if it's the Boeing wide body plant, that makes it easy. We just make one phone call to them and they'll find it and take care of it. If it's not them, then we have to narrow it down even farther.
And with Gene's promotion, guess who gets Boeing now?
So the local limits subplot, we are the history of our local limits. They were first created by Brown and Caldwell when they wrote our original program in 1986 when we were delegated. Then in 1993, we did a full local limit study and adopted new limits. Since then, we've just been doing annual evaluation of our local limits. We look at loadings, removal rates, and all along we determined that the current limits were protective of the plant, so we weren't required to do another local limit study. But the errors we made, we weren't doing enough trend analysis. We basically weren't looking at it. And we weren't looking at any constituents that we didn't have current limits for. So those were two problems there. So why a full local limit study now? Well, it's time. We haven't done one for 27 years. We're going to need a local limit for molybdenum, so may as well do them all. There's new guidance, and I'm updating the ordinance, so it's a good time to do it. The challenges we faced in doing the local limit study is we didn't have recent background data. Due to manpower problems, we stopped doing the background sampling about 15 years ago. So going forward, we're going to do background sampling every 7 months or so, and that way it'll move throughout the year and give us a supply of data that we can use next time we do this. No one here has done a local limit study in over 30 years. My last one was at a previous employer when I started up their pretreatment program. We have multiple outfalls. We have a marine outfall and we have an estuary outfall, which have different water quality standards. And I sure wish I could point, because this is our MC Escher treatment plant. Everything comes into the headworks and then goes through a diversion structure. Some of it goes to the ponds, some of it goes to the mechanical plant. After the primary clarifier, some of it goes to our trickling filters, some of it goes back to the pond plant. Some of the pond plant goes into the trickling filters, and once it goes through the secondary clarifiers, then we can send it back to the aeration cells or send it out to our outfall, the deep water outfall, or it just goes in circles. And they're talking about adding another circle to where it can go from the lagoon system back to the south effluent pump station at the top there and be pumped to our deep water outfall. So our treatment plant is complex.
Gene,
So
if I could just add there briefly, when I first came to work on Golden Brown Pond in 1988, I remember how simple the system was, and they told us they were marrying. They were going to have a marriage between TFSC and the lagoon. I never realized how true that term was.
So with the way our plant's set up, we're using the mean removal efficiency method for calculating everything. Our lagoon system detention times range from 20 to 120 days, so we can't use the other two methods because we can't do paired sampling. It's just not possible. We've got a good quarterly data set for doing the long-term removal efficiency. And right now we're gathering data for uncontrollable loading. We have one more round of background sampling to do for our wet weather flows. So we'll be doing that in January, and then we'll be doing the calculations. As we continue on, we'll validate the data, see if there's anything that just looks weird. Once it's validated, we have an associate engineer who will be doing our calculations, and we estimate the timeline for completion about second quarter of 2021, which will dovetail well with our timeline for our new ordinance. And that pretty much concludes our presentation. This is the reference for the EPA local limits guidance. this is a nice update. It made it very good compared to the 1987 or 88 guidance. So we are open for questions now.
Great, wonderful. Thanks, guys. We have a question on here asking if you guys have a feeling of where, this perhaps the molybdenum could be coming from. Is where this is coming from.
We're thinking it's probably corrosion control discharge from some kind of HVAC cooling towers, but we're not sure. It is, that area where we're getting it from has a lot of aerospace manufacturing. So it could be a discharge from one of those too. Like I said, we're hoping it's Boeing because that's the easy button.
And I have noticed with a little research that I believe the top 5 manufacturing uses of molybdenum are metal work, alloys, chemical catalyst use, lubricants, pigments, and fertilizer. I read an article recently about how certain media for 3D printing can have 1 to 2% molybdenum compounds in them. So I don't know of those, but yes, I hope that, as Gene says, if it traces up to our largest employer, then that might make it easier, but we're not concluding that yet.
Okay. Another question reads, have you collected samples in the collection system to possibly trace sources? Can you tell us a little bit more about what you've been doing?
Yeah, that's what we've been, that's the way we've been doing it. We've been collecting through our collection system, working our way upstream. Like I said, like Charles said, the first one was the headworks, which made it easy to divide into 2. And then we've been sampling trunk lines and lift stations upstream to work our way upstream.
Okay. Let's see. Another question that's just came in. Have you reviewed your industrial waste surveys over the last 5, 10, 15 years to look for new industrial users?
We have a continuous industrial waste survey set up where we are looped into our development group. We're looped into a plans review. So we've had lots of things come in over the past 10 to 15 years, but nothing that has shown likely to be high molybdenum.
Okay.
It's also a challenge because there could be some little job shop or somebody out there doing something that that we have not covered in a previous survey, and because it appears to be intermittent, we'll sample in a 14-day period and we might get, what, Gene, 2 or 3 hits during that time.
Typically once to twice a week is when we see it.
Okay.
So whether it boils down to getting, excuse me, getting more intensive about the sampling, for example, discrete sampling, that remains to be seen. But right now we're still looking at it not from the high elevation, but we're still cruising over the terrain from a couple 100 feet up.
I see. Someone asked that if, let's see, in your upstream sampling, have you noticed any other metals with higher levels that correlate with the higher molybdenum levels?
We have not. It seems to be a molybdenum only discharge of some sorts, which is really pushing it toward the cooling tower.
Are you guys able to, someone's asking if you're able to ask Boeing to, or have you asked Boeing to run analysis for molybdenum in their waste stream?
They do analyzed for molybdenum semi-annually in their regulated discharge, and they don't have any, which we haven't seen it there either. We haven't had them do it on their final effluent there because we're not going to make them spend money if we don't know it's them.
Right.
The initial thought from certain people in our management was, well, it's got to be Boeing, so go make them look at it. But we approached it scientifically. We said we need to trace it back and find out where it's coming from before we make anybody spend money. The Boeing discharge, they have their regulated industrial discharge is 60 to 70,000 gallons per day. Their total site discharge right now is running about 400,000 gallons per day and can get up to 1 million gallons per day.
Wow. Well, with all of, since we have a little bit of time, with all the new people to all of the new pretreatment program staff in our region and across the nation, I'm wondering if you could take a minute or two to discuss your approach in scenarios like this. What's your approach to an illicit discharge investigation? Feel free to break down any part of that, or maybe just start from the beginning, or maybe just one takeaway of that you could provide, you could give to the folks who are the newbies that might see a similar scenario in their collection system.
The biggest problem with illicit discharge tracing is a lot of times it'll be a one-time thing. Your plant will go toes up, or there will be something weird in your influent. And if your operators notice it in time and manage to get a good sample of it, then you've got something to go by. But luckily or unluckily, this was something that started about 3 years ago. It wasn't there before, and all of a sudden it is. So that tells us that something has changed. We initially looked at the new places that came in during that 3-year period and didn't see anything. So the best thing you can do is in your downtime, assuming you ever have any, is get background sampling. Get the data that you expect to see in your system, and that gives you something to compare to when you're doing other. When something weird comes in, then you've got something to compare it to. And
to my point about more data.
Yeah, and once you get something like this happening, the only real way to figure out who it is to do investigative sampling through key manholes. Start working your way up back through the system from the treatment plant.
Okay.
Sometimes you'll get lucky looking. I don't know any way to put it, but looking at something. I recall in the last year having a complaint call from a former employee that I did not confirm the dumping that was alleged, but I did identify a categorical process, and it wasn't that they were trying to hide something. It was that they didn't understand that it was categorical. And so that they are one of our newest non-significant CIU.
Okay, interesting. Well, thanks for sharing. We had one last question here, and they're just wondering why the city of Everett, why the city couldn't set up their sampler and run the Mo in their lab.
We do run it in our lab. It's just I'm assuming the question is why the delays to get the data back, and that is the way our lab runs. when they get enough samples in the backlog to do a full metals run, because it's time consuming, it's manpower consuming. You have to do the digestions and then run the data, then go through QA, QC, and data approval. So it typically takes us about 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks to get data back from a sampling run.
Okay.
And
Okay.
since we're sampling these things in 2-week chunks, they'll store up all our samples, because that gives him pretty much a full setup for the ICP for his digestion and running the samples.
I see. Are you guys able to, could you guys give us some pointers, or someone asked specifically, with your wealth of experience from the city of Everett, what gems can you give us for good tactics for site inspections to get the information?
Don't believe
Kind of on
anything
the
they tell
spot,
you.
but
Yeah. Stick your nose through every door you can. And unfortunately for some of us who have no sense of smell anymore, smell.
Yeah.
I can typically find a plater just driving down the street, and I have. We found one that that wasn't on our inventory because they'd gone in as a tenant improvement in a small building, and just driving down the street, I said, that smells like a plater, and went and door knocking until I found them.
And
I see.
unfortunately, that sense and that skill is now not in my toolbox anymore.
Well, what are you guys using to track your data? We've had a couple presentations on technology.
We use Linko CTS, and we are in the process of adding in the direct LIMS import module, as well as the what they call Linko Exchange, which will be full Chrome Air approved electronic reporting by our users.
Okay. All right. Well, good stuff.
But for the data for this particular effort, it doesn't really dovetail in well with the CTS, so we're just using spreadsheets.
Okay. All right. Well, good information. Thank you for your insight. I don't see any more questions, so we will thank you so much for giving us your time today and sharing with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too.
I did want to make one clarification for everyone on here. I should have mentioned this earlier, but if you get an answer or a chat from Raul Gonzalez asking you to email me, saying email me, that's actually me. I'm logged in under our administrative organization, our sponsor organization's credentials. So Ed Gonzalez, he is the director of the PPRC, the Pacific Northwest Pollution Prevention Resource Center. And they're sponsoring the pretreatment workshop. So I apologize in advance if you've been asked to email me. That's from Raul. That's actually me, Andrea Swan. Since I'm moderating these webinars, I'm getting them started each day. I've just logged in under their account. So sorry for the confusion. We would like to, I think, Ari, you wanted to mention our networking event one more time before we close for the day. You had some new info or some fun stuff to mention. Is that right, Ari?
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. I'm going to close up this poll and post results. Yeah, so we have the networking event tonight. It's going to be John Gross with Coal Street Designs has got a pretty good entertainment package set up for the ones in the initial group, and then we'll break off into our other groups. They're going to have some raffles, I understand, and just if anything, I think they're just going to send out a regular invite for everybody, and if anything, just come and check it out. You're welcome to leave whenever you want. There's no obligation to stay, but come check it out. Network with a few of the folks across the country. Unfortunately, on the East Coast, it's not as easily attendable, I'm sure, as it is for us here on the West Coast, but we're trying our best. So anyways, yeah, come check it out and check out the raffles and check out what John has ready to go for us. I think he's got together a pretty good opportunity for people to get together and let their hair down a little bit. And also the breakout rooms, I think, should be interesting as well. So thanks, you guys.
Yeah, and I think they were saying that I think what our hope would be was that we'd start the event with some just games and fun conversation, just to see folks that we hadn't seen for a while, and meet new folks. And then after probably the first, I think 20 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on how it goes, then break off into the breakout rooms. May not be that long. I'm not sure what to expect. This is our first virtual networking event. So, but do join us if you'd like, and email me if you want to get on that list. They may send out a general email asking you to RSVP. And if you do RSVP in the positive, just indicate which room you're most interested in. Unless you just want to come for the first part, join in on some of the fun Zoom games. I've not been to an event with Zoom games before, so this should be really interesting. Okay, and let's see, I'm gonna go ahead and close out the day by thanking you guys for attending, reminding you that if you had any hiccups with the polls today and you do need CEUs, just shoot me an email and we'll get it sorted out. I may ask you for some takeaways from the presentation that you are that you missed the poll for. If it's not, if your email isn't directly following or during one of our poll events. And let's see, I think that's about it. We hope to see you guys on Monday, November 16th for our final day of our workshop. And just one more reminder that we will be sending out a survey and your feedback is valuable. So, all right, folks, thank you so much for attending. And we will hopefully see a lot of you guys tonight at 5:30 Pacific Standard Time. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.